one of the first things this physician should do is stop telling the patient to go exercise. This is one disease you cannot exercise.
And we know from our own surveys that graded exercise, in actual fact, makes about over 50% of people with this illness worse.
The results were published in The Lancet in 2011. The media reported that all ME sufferers had to do to recover was exercise. However, the report was immediately questioned by the patient community. How could exercise, the very thing that was known to worsen symptoms, actually help? Calls to publish the raw data, basic protocol and good research were ignored. Queen Mary University spent an estimated £200,000 on keeping this data hidden. Finally, after a long battle, patients won a court order to force the PACE authors to release this data.
Independent analyses showed that on the originally intended recovery criteria, only 7% of the patients recovered, which is more or less the same as the control group. It's a little bit higher, but non-significantly higher. So there was no effect based on the original criteria, a massive effect based on the new criteria that just happened to be easier to achieve.
I have seen scientists writing in journals like this, Journal of Health Psychology, calling out the PACE trial. There's a huge amount of evidence, Mr. Rossendale, from the science community, from very eminent people, questioning the whole PACE trials, their methodology, the evidence they used, the way they treated the patients.
This controversy then can create interpersonal hostility, group polarization, and what have you. And very quickly, the argument isn't about what the evidence shows. The argument is about your tone in how you are bringing your point forward. So you have all of this talk about we're being harassed by patients, we're being bullied by patients, instead of actually engaging with the core points involved. Online activists are silencing us, scientists say. So there's a big concern in the modern world about fake news and people being skeptical towards science. You think of vaccination or climate emergency and so on. Those anti-vaxxers and climate change deniers, they're characterized as a kind of a lunatic fringe. Well, in my view, and I'll put this concisely, it seems to me that the bubble of people at the center of PACE and related approaches are using that narrative to accuse their critics of being a lunatic fringe. Okay, they're accusing them of being anti-science rather than good at critically evaluating a methodology. The Science Media Centre have people in their governance structure who are personally loyal to the PACE trial, and when a news study appears in the media saying, the criticism of the PACE trial is unfair and we're being harassed, not criticised, this isn't an academic discussion, it's cyberbullying, they say things like that, it's hard to unpick the fact that there's a conflict of interest there that should really be declared. And it doesn't take much for mainstream commentary to spill over into sort of shock jock type commentary. So the positions that scientists take to defend their own studies against criticism have real world consequences. That information doesn't exist in a bubble, it filters out into society. And the next thing you know, you have a patient group who are vilified and ostracized and laughed at by the mainstream population. And it's not fair. And I would put it to you in moral terms, it's simply not fair.
Interestingly, Professor Sharp, who I've already mentioned, one of the authors of the PACE trial, has emailed me this week. He has told me that my behaviour is unbecoming of an MP. So I say to Professor Sharp that if listening to my constituents, investigating their concerns and taking action as a result is unbecoming, then I stand guilty.
What I find so shocking about this debate is that scientists seem not to want to have this debate. The fact that the Honourable Lady has been written to by a scientist and has been called out, I hope right honourable members from across this House will find shocking.